Welcome back to Make It Public. I'm Ashley Butenschoen, and I have got guest Andrew Gustafson here from Ferndale. He is a parent and what should we call you, a school board warrior, I think?
Something like that.
Rebel rouser, fellow rebel rouser.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I embrace that
Right.
moniker.
And we've got Jennifer Heine Withee from Parents' Rights and Education. Welcome, Jennifer. So you're not from the area. Tell us where you're from.
I am from Southwest Washington,
Okay.
down in the Vancouver area.
Okay, so you came up and you spoke to the Northwest Business Club today. Is that correct?
I did. Yes, I did. Yep.
Okay, so, we took advantage of, thanks to Andrew and Ellen Baker, we took advantage of having you come into the studio. So give us and our listeners just kind of a rundown of what you do, how you came to do it with Parents' Rights in Education.
Well, it was about, 3 years ago that in my kids' school district, they were introducing a comprehensive sexual education into the high school. And I was disturbed by what they wanted to teach our kids. And so I and a group of parents got together, decided we needed to do something. We were able to gather our community. And at the first meeting where the board was going to be voting on this curriculum, we had 200 people show up and tell the board no. We were able to hold that curriculum off for, say, a year and a half until word came down that our state was going to pass a comprehensive sexual education mandate.
Right.
And then our board pushed through the curriculum. It was against overwhelming opposition in our community. But from there, that's where Parents' Rights in Education, the Washington chapter, was born.
Right, and so for those parents who, a lot of parents are kind of heightened to the sex education, the CRT right now, but for those who don't really know with the comprehensive sex education plan, is it just high school? Can you give an outline a little bit here of what we're facing?
Yeah, the law was passed in 2020 that mandates comprehensive sexual education be taught in all grades, starting in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the law states that K through 3 must be social emotional learning, but they have standards already for sex ed to be taught in K through 3. The Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, that's Chris Reichdahl, he's our superintendent. He has given permission to school districts to teach sex ed to kids K through 3 if they wish. And in fact, Lori Dills, she is the director of sexual health education for the state, she has stated on video that she sees the future of sex ed starting in kindergarten. So by next year, every district must have a comprehensive sexual education curriculum for both the high school and the middle school. And by the following year, then it will go down to the grade schools. And in fact, in Tacoma, a school district there has jumped the gun. They have already started teaching sex ed to K through 3. But when we talk about CSE, or comprehensive sexual education, this isn't the sex ed that most adults had when they were in school. They learned
Right.
reproduction, birth control, puberty, those kind of things.
Right, and I was going to ask, you start, so in 5th grade, it's been that in 5th grade, you're going to have a week where you learn about it, and you can opt out, and you can do it, and I'd say there's a good amount of kids who don't want to, and there's a fair amount of parents who in the past with just the reproductive part, how my body's changing, and those type of topics who have opted out. And this has gone from puberty education and reproductive education to straight on talk about sex. It's so bad that they can't even, when I've seen when parents are reading through some of the curriculum at school board meetings that are televised, they can't because it's so graphic.
Yes. Yep. When the mandate was being debated on the House floor, Representative Vicki Kraft actually started reading from some of the approved curriculum from the OSPI, and they televise all of these floor debates.
Right.
They put up a parental warning because of the graphic nature of what she was reading. This graphic nature is the theory that children are sexual beings from birth. They have a right to explore sexual pleasure, their sexuality, their gender identity, and parents a lot of times get in the way of this exploration. But they also teach kids through comprehensive sexual education advocacy. Mm-hmm. So they're advocating for their own sexual health. They're advocating for control over their sexual well-being. And that's taking rights away from parents to really direct the health of their children.
Right. And, so can you tell me here in our state, our legislators, is it supported in an overwhelming amount? I mean, for us, we've got legislators that I know support up here. And so can you tell us on a state level, what is the legislative support for this?
When it was passed on a purely bipartisan level. There was one Democrat.
A partisan level.
Or partisan, sorry.
Yes, partisan.
Excuse me, thank you. It was passed on a partisan level. There was one Democrat from Shelton, I believe, or his last name is Shelton. I can't remember.
Tim, I can't remember his name. I know
Yes.
what you're talking about.
Yes. He sided with parents and voted against it.
Okay.
But otherwise, all the Democrats voted for it. All the Republicans voted against it.
Okay.
And the parents, you need to speak about the parent involvement, because hand in hand with what legislators supported this is what was the response from parents at their opportunities to engage with the legislature.
Right, and then this became voted on, and people who are not parents got to decide what goes in our schools with our children who are in kindergarten.
They do. But, what we've got to remember is these children are going to grow up and be a part of our community. They're going to be running things when we get old. And so even if a person isn't a parent, their tax dollars still go to the schools, and they're going to be living in a community with these children running that community. So they do have a vested interest in how children are educated.
Do you think they're properly educated on this topic before voting on it, though?
No, I don't think they were. I think that the proponents of this law were deceptive. Mm-hmm. I mean, they kept saying, look, it needs to be medically accurate and age appropriate and inclusive, and you can opt out. Okay? Yes, you can opt out. Parents can opt their children out. But let's define age appropriate. Age appropriate is not teaching kindergartners, first graders about their genitals. That's not age appropriate. It's not age appropriate to be teaching middle schoolers about pleasure, to have them role-playing scenarios so they know how to talk about sex. That's not age appropriate.
Right, because we're creating a curiosity in a topic that, I mean, kids naturally will get there, but when we start doing it at such an early young age, we're making them aware of things that are not children's behavior.
Correct.
And so, yeah, going back to what Andrew said, so when this passed, how soon did parents kind of uprise?
They started uprising when the first time that it was in the House of Representatives, and that was in 2019. It was introduced in 2019. It was shut down when it was in the House. Now, they were able to bring it back the next year. Even more parents got on board then. In fact, when they had phone calls, people calling into Olympia saying, we don't want this, this is just phone calls. 21,668 people called into Olympia and said, we don't want this.
Yeah.
That was compared to 191 who said, yes, this is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they started waking up then. Of course, in 2020, they passed it. And that is when the petition for Referendum 90 was drafted. Now, when we gathered signatures on Referendum 90 to get it on the ballot, giving voters the chance to vote it down, that was in the middle of COVID.
Right.
And that's when we were all shut down, businesses were closed, we weren't able to go outside of our house, and we got a state record for signatures on a petition to get it on the ballot. So that kind of tells you how passionate people are about this. And I was gathering signatures, and we would have people come up and say, well, I'm not a parent. And I'd say, what this is doing is it's giving us the voters the chance to make the decision on it rather than legislators. Oh, well, I'll sign that. Mm-hmm. We should make that decision, not legislators.
Right, because they're supposed to do what we want them to. They're supposed to be our representatives.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Right. So, you were talking about how parents have the option to opt their kids out. But I would argue that maybe on paper they do, but they don't, because it is now woven into everything. And I know there are teachers who choose not to teach this, but it's real hard to look at how in the last 2 years teachers have been removed from school because of certain reasons. There's a weeding out of maybe the more conservative educators and ones that may not want to teach this. Or maybe the teachers don't even realize the path that they're heading down. Do you know how much money the teachers' unions had spent in pro-sex education for this?
A whole lot more than they spent on the other side.
Right.
I don't have an exact dollar amount. I do know that when it was on the ballot and you looked at the people who were, or the groups that were endorsing the bill, it was about 3 pages long. Right. And I mean, there was everybody from Planned Parenthood to, there was several Democrat committees, Rainbow Coalition.
Because as the referendum was on the ballot, of course, you recall, it was a little confusing. You had to vote if you were against the CSE legislation. You had to vote for the referendum.
You had to vote no.
Vote no on the referendum.
Yeah. So if you think of it this way, as our legislators passed a law, they said yes to this law.
Right.
What we were doing was giving voters an opportunity. Do you want to say yes to this law, or do you want to say no to this law?
And the yes supporters stacked deep with all the financial contributions driving the support for the yes vote on Referendum 90, which tipped the scales in that election.
Right, and it's always very telling when you follow the money, and you'll start to see the connections of the different agendas.
Yes.
And you'll see between this and CRT, and now the connections of, really, do parents have a choice, or are we allowing these interests to guide where the education's going? And it's no longer the fundamentals of learning.
No.
And so, so back to my question with parents having the choice and it being woven in, I mean, so we've had school board members who've come on here and talked about what kind of curriculum or books or different things are in the schools. Mm-hmm. And so you've got a few here.
I do. I want to say one thing about this idea of parents don't really have too much of a choice. Mm-hmm. Yes, they can opt out. But remember, all their classmates are going to be taking this.
Right.
So what I always tell parents is, do you want your daughter dating a boy who has been in the sex ed class and learned that the withdrawal method is free, always available, and works better than you might think? Because that's what they're going to teach them through this curriculum. Do you want your daughter dating that boy? So yes, you've opted your daughter out, but her classmates are still taking this.
Right. And at a time where kids, the gender dysphoria right now is so bad amongst middle school girls. Mm-hmm. I mean, amongst kids in general from middle school to high school, but it's so bad right now. But the schools have kind of come along in a time where our kids are very vulnerable for suicide, and I mean, bullying is so bad with social media. The schools have been, oh, it's okay, we'll come along and be your friend, maybe your parents don't understand.
Exactly.
And so now we're adding it to the reading in the schools. And so I seen this one. It says A for activist. I saw this in a bookstore here in Linden, where I live. We're not in Linden right now, but in Linden where I live. But I found this one interesting. I thought, well, I'm sure no one's gonna buy this. This is ridiculous. This one, it says T is for trans, for trains, tiaras, tulips, tractors, and tigers too. Trust in the true, the he, she, they, that is you. Sorry. This is a cardboard book, which is for toddlers to like first grade.
Yes.
And this, where did you guys find this?
I got that on Amazon, but you can find that in, I think it's the Puyallup School District. That was found in the library. It was either that or Tahoma School District. And yeah, board books. You get board books for kids generally who are teething.
Right. Right. So, okay, so that's one. And then we've got, I could go on about that one. But, yes. So this one here, Felix Ever After. Tell us about this one. So Greg, is this a good camera here? So here we've got, this is a trans female.
Trans male.
Okay, see, I don't completely understand. So it was a female.
Yes, Felix is a female who is transitioning to the male.
Okay.
She has had top surgery, and you can see that evident because it shows her mastectomy scars on the book. So this book was found during Pride Week in a display at Zeiger Elementary in the Puyallup School District. And that is not a grade school book. In fact, when I looked it up on Amazon, it's for high school students and older.
Okay.
Yes.
Queer, Black, queer, and transgender, happy ever after.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so what's this one here? Stamped for kids?
Yes, that is by Ibram X. Kendi. That's a book on race and equity. That was from Carson Middle School. I think it's a middle school, Carson. In the high school, they also have the older version of that. And if you know anything about Ibram X. Kendi, mm-hmm. he is a big proponent for anti-racism. If you are not anti-racism, you are a racist.
Right. And so this says racism, anti-racism, and you. Mm-hmm. We had Black Lives Matter weeks in some of the schools here in Whatcom County recently, and I went on the website and I shared it, but it's quite troubling to see the stuff they're trying to put into school. It's activism. We're teaching activism.
Yes.
From preschool, if they can get it that young, all the way up.
Yes.
With this agenda. And go ahead,
Jennifer,
Andrew.
When we see the books like this, and I know this is just a small sampling of what you have in your car, what you've discovered, these are just some of the inputs that are being used to put ideas into the minds. They're one of several inputs. The curriculum writ large that the school districts are officially approving, I wonder if you could speak to those, because I know there's the way that's set up is there's some approved curriculums, CSE curriculums that school districts can take advantage of for lower cost, or if they're willing to abide by the state requirements for the curriculum, they can develop their own, but it is prohibitively expensive to do that. So most school districts just opt to use the existing stock curriculum. So we're letting in very agenda-driven curricula, and I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So when we talk about critical race theory, there is no critical race theory curriculum. You're not going to find a course or a class that is titled Critical Race Theory, because it is a theory, a platform that is woven into areas of education. In the Evergreen School District, now they don't call it critical race theory.
Right, they've rebranded it.
Yes, so it is culturally responsive teaching. But what they're doing and how it is described is getting children to see themselves within the curriculum so they relate to what is in the curriculum. Okay, when you've got a classroom of kids who are watching, say, a video about migrant workers and the plight of migrant workers, Hispanic migrant workers, and how, they aren't working in very good conditions. When you've got that Hispanic girl in the class, seeing herself as one of these migrant workers and relating to it, because that's what they want, is kids to see themselves within the education. So she sees the plight of this migrant worker and she goes, they are me. They're like me. I'm like them. We're the same. Well, then she starts taking on the plight of the migrant worker, which in reality, her dad is a doctor, an accountant, or, a businessman or something. She's not one of those migrant workers, but all of a sudden she has taken on that persona. Mm-hmm. Well, who is the ones who are oppressing and harming those migrant workers? They're white, And so starting to see themselves like that, well, then they start having feelings about their white peers. That's how this kind of thing starts. And that culturally responsive teaching, that's the end result. It might not be the goal of it, but that's what happens.
That's a very subversive tactic on the CRT side of things. On the CSE side of things, on the comprehensive sex ed side of things, I wonder if you could speak to the curriculum there, the stock curriculum that districts are adopting, or the very few districts are probably developing their own. Because what's happening is that the stock curriculums, you correct me if I'm wrong here, are being pushed down to the district level, and they're loaded with all kinds of things that are objectionable.
Yeah, so the OSPI, they have a list of curriculums, of CSE curriculums that have already been through the standards, and the OSPI says these have passed the standards. Any district can use these. They don't need to get any sort of approval. Now, the law also states that any district can choose their own curriculum, but that curriculum must fit the standards. It must fit the law, and they have to send it to the OSPI for approval, because the OSPI makes sure that it is by the standards, by the law. Well, if the OSPI doesn't simply like your curriculum that you've chosen, they're going to find a way to say no. And in the school district I'm in, Battleground School District, we're kind of going through that right now. The curriculum that originally was chosen was one approved by the OSPI, and the community didn't like it.
Okay.
And so they're looking at curriculum right now that has not been approved by the OSPI. It does meet the standards, but it still will need to go up to the OSPI, and hopefully they will say, yep, you can teach that.
But essentially, they have the control. So if you're choosing a milder version of what they've got and it's not explicit enough, then they're just going to tell you no.
Yeah, they very well could tell us no.
What names of curriculum should parents be looking for? Flash, 3 R's?
Flash curriculum is probably used the most in the state of Washington. It stands for Family Life and Sexual Health. Rights, Respect, Responsibility, or the 3 R's. That is also used quite a bit because it's free. So it's the only one that the entire K through 12 curriculum has been approved. Another one that they have approved is called Health Smart. That is put out by an organization called ETR. There's the Great Body Shop. That one's used frequently. Those are probably the main ones to look at.
If your parents see those names, they should start digging in.
Yes, very much so.
Do you, with the 3 R's, do you know who funds that? Since it's free, that scares me.
Yep, it's from an organization called Advocates for Youth. And just like its name, a big part of it is advocacy. And that's also a big element of CSE is teaching advocacy. They're teaching kids about sex, sexuality, gender, sexual health, where to go to get these services, the fact that in the state of Washington, they don't need parental permission. But then they teach kids to teach these things to their friends and become an advocate for sexual health services. And funny thing, Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest providers of CSE curriculum in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't find that shocking at all. So do you have any examples of curriculum or anything else that you want to show us?
I did not bring examples of curriculum, but on the parentsrightsined.org website, that's parentsrightsined.org, we do have samples of curriculum that people can go and look at there.
Okay, so I think that's a link that we can link down below for anyone who's watching this. We can put that in our description. We'll link that so people can take a look. So what, I guess now you've seen this, what are our parents now in mass numbers going into school boards and saying, we just don't want any curriculum? Or is it that we want this curriculum, we don't want these curriculums? What are you seeing, or is it different depending on what, area you're in?
I think it's different depending on districts. There are some districts, take the Seattle School District, there's a lot of parents who are gung-ho for all of this.
Right.
And there are parents there that don't like this. Unfortunately, they're outnumbered. Mm-hmm. But what we're telling parents is educate yourself, get activated, and then motivate others to join you. Get educated about the curriculum in your school. What are your board policies? Get to know your school board members. Form a dialogue, a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. Get to know your kids' teachers, what is hanging in their classroom. And then get activated. Go to school board meetings. Inform the school of, hey, this book is in the library and this is not appropriate. Get on the curriculum review committee. You want to have a part in what is going in front of students. When they're adopting new curriculum, they put together a committee to look at that curriculum. Get on one of those committees. Get on the instructional review committee. Get active in your school district that way. Get to know what bills are coming before our legislators. Send an email. Testify. It's really easy to testify right now since it's remote.
Right. And
then talk to other parents, and not just parents, grandparents, anybody who is concerned about our community. Even though a person doesn't have kids, they still belong to that community. They still pay taxes, and those kids are going to be the ones running their town, their city, their state when they're old. So they have a vested interest in how kids are educated. So they do have a voice. They can run for school board, be in the meetings, looking at curriculum.
Right, and some parents think, well, my kids are safe if I just put them in private school or Christian school. But I would argue, one, you've now got teachers going into those schools who are young and they're teaching this. And some private schools have no idea until a parent speaks up and says something.
Yes. And a lot of times what happens is the private school will tell that parent, you can take your kid somewhere else.
Right.
And that's true.
Right.
Yep.
And do you think this opens a door? So we're talking mainly about sex education, but do you think this has opened a door to all other things that the school is going to bring up in order to influence kids? I mean, we've got the racism topic. We've got medical, beyond sex, but medical. Do you think this is kind of the doorway into taking away more and more of parents' rights?
I think so. I think the CSE is. And that's because not only are they teaching this, but now we've got school-based health clinics going into schools. There's over 60 school-based health clinics in the state of Washington. And last legislative session, they passed a law that created a new department in the Department of Health with the sole purpose of putting together and issuing grants to schools to help them establish a school-based health clinic. So you're teaching the kids about sex, then you're providing all of the sexual health services right there at the school that they can access during the school hours. Plus, you put that with the fact that in the state of Washington, kids 13 and older have control of their own medical records. Mm-hmm. They can seek medical attention without parental permission or notification.
Yeah, can I give an example?
Yes.
My daughter was going in to get an ultrasound of her neck, and she's 14. And we went in, and they said, oh, is she 13 or older? And I said, yes. They're like, oh, well, you need to have written permission from her to access her medical records. And if any of you have heard this show, and I dang near came flying off the handle, like, excuse me? Who's paying her medical bill?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Exactly.
sure it's me.
Exactly.
And yet I am not allowed to get her medical records or hear her results without her written permission. Then here's the kicker. They gave me a survey and that she had to fill out and said, well, she probably needs your help filling it out. Yeah. Heck no. You want her to fill it out? She better be able to do it on her own. If she can't, point made.
Yep.
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that kids, I mean, they can't be trusted to vote or drink, but they can be trusted to make a life-altering decision.
And that's just a benign application of this new law. The really devious application is what's going on when you join that new law. 13-year-olds control their destiny, plus in-school health clinics. I mean, you were talking earlier about this being one of the biggest threats to parental oversight and guidance of their own children, is the collision of those two things. Tell us more about that.
And in-school health clinics, is Planned Parenthood at all connected to that? I'm sure they probably are in some way.
In California, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There are over 50 Planned Parenthood clinics in schools. Now, I've looked at the list of clinics that are in Washington schools. I haven't seen Planned Parenthood listed. That's not saying that they don't have their hand
Funding,
in there, and that it's not going to happen in the future now that we have this grant program. But, picture this. So a child is suffering from gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now if they're 13 and over, they can seek mental health counseling without parental knowledge or permission. So they go in and they see a mental health counselor at their school-based health clinic. In the state of Washington, therapists must counsel in a gender-affirming fashion. So, child goes in, I'm confused about my gender. That therapist affirms that confusion. Well, the next course of treatment is to get them on puberty blockers and hormones, which they can then get from the school-based clinic.
Is it free? So it doesn't have to go through insurance? Like the parents may absolutely not know?
Well, even if it does go through insurance, remember, kids 13 and over have control of their own medical records, and the insurance company will not tell the parents what it is that the parents are paying for.
This is asinine.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's
and so
again, I've said this before. All we are is landlords.
Yes.
And they're not even paying rent.
Yes, and a bank account.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, yeah. So, not only that, but they get on the hormones. Well, the next step is to go through surgery. And now in the state of Washington, insurance companies cannot discriminate against a person who is going through gender-affirming surgeries. So the insurance company pays for that. And you can end up with a child who has changed their gender without parents knowing what's going on. And considering that 80 to 95% of kids who are suffering from gender dysphoria, if they are loved and supported doesn't mean affirmed.
Right.
But if they're loved, cared for, supported, and allowed to go through natural puberty, by the time they become an adult, they come to accept their biological sex. So we're letting kids decide all of this stuff when their brain isn't fully developed, yet they get to adulthood and they now have a body that has been drugged up and mutilated through surgeries. They're infertile. They cannot experience a meaningful sex life like an adult would, and they haven't even started on their life, and they're sitting there going, what have I done? And it's not reversible.
You said something earlier when we were talking how they end up in that position medically, physically, and mentally castrated.
Yes.
Irreversibly.
Yeah, do you know the suicide rate for the trans community? I know 2 years ago it was quite high, and that's before teens were really making that transition.
I think it's around 30 to 40%, but here's the thing. What they have found by studying the trans community in the Netherlands is that doesn't change after surgery.
Right.
And in the Netherlands, trans individuals have been accepted and embraced for a very long time. And so in a community like that, if surgery and affirmation were the answer, you would think that the suicide rates are lower.
Right.
But they're not.
Right. And you know, I mean, again, free country, right? Adult decision is what is, I think, for me, it's an adult decision to sex in general. I mean, not that kids don't have sex, but it should be something you're doing as an adult. And because they lead to adult consequences sometimes, and making a complete change of your gender should not be something we're introducing to a 13-year-old.
No.
I mean, it used to be that people would say it's child abuse to be messing with a kid's head like this at 16 or 18, but now it's okay down to 13. But really, we've started it in kindergarten now.
And the the trans angle on this is just one offshoot of the entire comprehensive sex education. Because even if you just take the trans issue and just put it to a side, you still have the sexualization of kids starting at, aspirationally is what they want, kindergarten and up.
Exactly. And it's going to be younger. The second they subsidize the child care and the federal government pays for all child care, it will be the second you have your children, we'll just take them for you.
Because they are bought in on the idea that children are sexual beings, and so that then informs everything that they teach after that. So when parents finally get, and I really appreciate your insights on, even if you're not a parent or a grandparent in your community, it's so insightful the way you're positioning it. The kids in school today will be in our community for the next 60, 70 years and be involved in the future shaping of the community. They're being manipulated in their formative years to and being introduced to things way before they should possibly be introduced to them. And there's so many other ramifications and things that are taught in this part of this comprehensive sex education, regardless of the curriculum, that of course have parents just up in arms. And parents, of course, with the state we're in here in Washington, are rightfully frustrated. It is now the law. I get stone faces from my school board when I go and talk to them. My administration is not just, they're almost throwing it in our face, the fact that they're gleefully following every rule and order from Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and creepy Chris Reichdahl. Like they're only too happy to do this, and parents are looking for the breaks. They're looking for the off-ramps. I really appreciate what you said a minute ago as you kind of outlined, a strategy as you talk to parents and educate. It's educate, activate, and motivate. I'm assuming that means motivate others.
Yes.
That's, at this point in the conversation for folks that are listening right now, they're obviously as ratcheted up and as ramped up as Ashley and I are, and as you probably are, all the time. I don't want the parents that are listening to this to walk away going, well, nothing we can do. Just another thing we have to deal with in our lives. Can we spend a little bit of time talking more about ways to plug in and get yourself educated, ways to get activated, ways to motivate others? Everybody has a different talent and skill set, so it's not going to be applicable to everybody. But there's some things that everybody can do, whether it's behind-the-scenes research, to FOIA requests, to going and speaking. There's just a plethora of things. And what's the encouragement? What kind of more specific, more prescriptive instructions would you give to parents and community members watching this right now?
Well, after referendum 90 passed, I started having to look at victory and success in a different way. So if you've got a school where, yes, they're teaching this comprehensive sexual education, and half of the school is opted out, my word, that's half of the school that's not getting this. That's a message to the school. Significant message. And, every time that these kids are opted out of sex ed, by law, they can't just go to the library for study hall. They have to be provided educational material that's equal in weight, which means if you've got that amount of kids, you need a classroom, you need a curriculum, you need a teacher that is going to be teaching it.
I love this. Number one, with a bullet, opt your kids out. This is what's called, I think the term is like rigorous compliance, where you lean into their dumb rules and you say, oh, well, you have a rule about opting, I have to opt my kids out, and I love what you're saying about providing all these other things. You make the school district bear the burden of the extra weight associated with that, especially if you can hit critical mass as a community of opting your kids out. I mean, in the notes, that's got to be number one with a bullet, opt your kids out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that is number one. If you can, pull your kids out of the public school altogether.
That's what I've done. It started during COVID, and I started to see the stuff that was being put in the state-mandated testing, and the subliminal stuff just stacking up. It was like, what the heck does this have to do with math? And so that was kind of the thing for me. I was like, okay, I'm done. And so I wanted the freedom to choose what they were learning. Yeah. And I mean, is there still a health class? Is there normal health class still?
Health class is part of PE in middle school and high school. It's part of PE. And that's where they're getting sex ed.
And what about psychology?
Don't know that is a requirement.
Yeah, I wonder if they've changed the psychology class and curriculum as well.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
With psychology.
So yeah, pulling your kids out, opting them out. What are the, so would you say pulling out is better than opting out? So if you can pull them.
Yep. Pull them out of school. We realize that not everybody is going to be able to take their kids out of public schools. That's why we keep fighting to make the schools better. Right. Because there's always going to be kids that are in the public schools.
Right there. I want to just crystallize that. For number two, pull your kids out of school if you can. That's great if you are set up to do that. And parents that can do that, I've talked to a number of homeschool families, and what I've so been impressed with those families is that they're still in the fight. And the reason that they're still in the fight is because their kids, even though they're educating them the way that they wanted to be educated, their kids are going to grow up around those kids that were educated in that environment. And that is not the kind of, they're fighting now for their future generations and for those other kids' futures too. Mm-hmm. So impressive to see homeschool moms and dads and grandparents in the fight, still in the schools, even though they've pulled their kids out of what they deem as harm's way.
Right. It's very important because we're communities. And we need to remain communities. And, to be honest, if we've got schools that it's like only 25% or less wants this education, why don't they go start their own school?
Well, that's why one of the things that we wanted, if they were going to pass this law, is an opt-in option.
At the district level.
At the state level. If they're going to have comprehensive sexual education in the schools, make it an opt-in rather than an opt-out. How many parents out there are going to just assume that, sex ed, it's just like what I learned, and my kids need to learn this stuff. They don't go to the curriculum review nights to look at what exactly is going in front of their child. They trust the schools. Okay. Until their child is coming home and talking about activism or the role playing that they did in school, or where they learned affirmative consent by acting out a scenario in class. In the Advocates for Youth curriculum in the 3 R's, one of the ways that they teach this affirmative consent is a role play exercise where they have kids in groups of threes. So student A does not want to have sex. Student B does want to have sex. Student C is the judge. So it's the job of student B to see if they can convince student A to have sex with the tools that they have learned in class. And then student C is to judge how well they did. And then they rotate. And that's teaching affirmative consent.
Or manipulation.
This is why, what I took down as a note here about what you just said, wrapped around that, is the legislation. Obviously, we're in a state where these ideas are not going to advance too far in the current construct down in elected officials down in Olympia. So November is going to be more important than ever to get the right people replaced and the right people into place down in Olympia for future legislation to pass. But that doesn't stop us from continuing as parents, grandparents, people in the community, bringing up to our elected officials, regardless of what comes after their name, these issues to them, what we desire, what we want them to do, what we want them to pursue in terms of legislative remedy to making it opt-in instead of opt-out. Like, that's an easy, important first step. You could largely get some bipartisan buy-in from that if you just debated it on its merits. And if you couldn't get that buy-in, of course, you can make them look foolish. Like, why wouldn't you want that to be an option, right? So it stresses the importance of A, what's coming up this November in the election, and B, keeping the pressure up on our legislators to get the right legislation put in place to make these corrections along the way, to buy us more time to get the bigger fixes put in place. If you're staying in the state, you might as well fight. You might as well get into this fight. Don't just sit back and wait for this to happen, because it's been happening, and it's people like you, Jennifer, that are leading the charge and showing us how to fight back.
Yeah, and Andrew, I'm glad you brought up legislation, because that's where I was going to go next. Is there any legislation currently that you guys are trying to work on with any of the lawmakers? Again, we might have listeners who just kind of don't really understand the process here, but is there any legislation that you want to bring to so session ends tomorrow?
Yes.
And we see lawmakers kind of like hands off. I'm like, wait, I don't want to do anything because I might not get elected. Well, to me, for some, the damage has been done. And this needs to be a very hot topic for this coming election. But what can we do to ask those who are running, and what can we start to educate ourselves on for the coming legislative session next year?
Well, I know a big thing now is getting school choice into the state of Washington, to get the money to follow the backpack. And there's a lot of aspects to that. How do we draft legislation that is airtight, so in the future the government can't go and start messing with the money and say, oh, well, since you're taking state money, you can't spend it at this school or on that curriculum or that sort of thing. And I think that's something for lawmakers to work out. This past legislative session, Representative Jim Walsh did bring forward a school choice bill. Mm-hmm. It didn't even make it to the floor because, of course, he's in the House of Representatives. Right. Representative Santos is the head of the House Education Committee. She is against school choice, so she didn't even bring it up for debate. Last year, Representative Vicki Kraft drafted a bill that would have brought school choice, and once again, the members of the House Education Committee didn't bring it up for even a debate. So we do need to get some different representation in Olympia. Right now, we have a Democrat-controlled legislator, and unfortunately, they are against school choice. They're pro-union, teachers union, and they're for all of these curriculums. When the mandate was passed, like I said, it was on a partisan line.
Right. So follow the backpack. Do you think that that's going to go anywhere? What are the chances that is it depend on how we vote? Are there those who support it on a bipartisan level, or is it partisan?
I think it is pretty much partisan. So I think that it will be dependent on who we get into the legislature. The only other way to do it would be to draft an initiative to put it on the ballot. That's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of signatures. I worked on the referendum.
Right.
We need to get 130,000 signatures for the referendum to get it on the ballot.
Right.
For a petition or for an initiative, it takes a whole lot more than that. I think it's also dependent on the number of registered voters in the state.
In the past election.
It is, yes.
There you go.
The school choice as a topic is having the most amazing last couple of years ever, because parents got to see what was going on in their classrooms through the computer screens while everybody was learning from home. And a broad spectrum of parents, maybe listening to this right now, are going to have a variety of opinions on this. But there's totally make sense ideas and compromises out there. Liv Fine with the Washington Policy Center has a number of proposals she's written policy papers on that are partial fundings for school choice. 20 some odd states, 26 odd states just in the last year have strengthened or put in place school choice legislation. It's having a renaissance like never before. And in Washington, we know what we're up against, but it's going to be tough for that side of the aisle to continue to argue against a lot of just make sense policies and ideas that are coming out, especially from folks like Liv, when you're getting continuous and constant pushback from parents against kind of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in schools, the CSE, the CRT, whatever happens, with masks on, off in the future and mitigations, and whatever happens with mandates on vaccinations. This is pressure that I think really needs to be continuously applied by parents and community members that are in the know on this, and regardless of the uphill battle that we face. Yes.
Yeah, and I think there's a flip side to this coin a little bit with parents' choice of all the backpack, because the second if that gets passed, you better bet they're coming for homeschoolers in a hurry. And so
one battle at a time.
Yeah,
though, right?
but that's something that homeschoolers are very worried about that. So I know the HSLDA is a place that parents can go and homeschoolers can go for resources. So I think, yes, one battle at a time, but also you got to know that they're already there. And so if we don't already put the armor on to be in that battle, it's not two battles to them, it's one.
That goes right back to your point number one. Educate.
Right.
I didn't, my involvement in education and speaking really came just in the last couple of years. I was disinterested for 20 some odd years, even as a taxpayer. And it only came up in the last couple of years when I noticed an inconsistency in my local school. And I just started asking questions, and those questions led to me speaking more specifically on things and educating myself. I've poured through board docs, and I've poured through the resources to educate myself, and it's taken a ton of time. It's not even really a topic I'm that interested in. But I do it because of my kids, and I do it because of the kids in the community that I know my kids are going to be around. And I think that if I had a challenge, like just the inspiration I've gotten from you and getting to know you, if I had a challenge for everybody listening out there, parents out there, it is not the funnest work to do. The education that comes along with getting to know exactly what's going on. But when you think about it like this, a full 2/3 of your property tax money goes to education, right? Your state levies, your local levy, your local bond, that's 2/3 of your property tax. So add it up what you're spending any given month and ask yourself, what kind of representation do I want to accompany my money that's going to the local school? And then go to your school boards and start speaking. I know that I get up there and I pay a couple $100 every month to speak in front of that school board, and I'm earning that's money well spent in my book.
Yeah, and I swear mine's tripled since I bought my house. But I think as we continue on, we have to look at the broad picture here, and they want our children. The people who've been working on this for 30 years, they want our children because it's an army for them. And so we have to remember that we are the parents, and think about it like this. A lot of people are concerned about environment. Environment is so much more than the grass and the air. It's also your community and your quality of life. And, can we afford to live here? Is this where we want to live because of the community that has come up in these children and the youth and young adults? what's it going to be, and what are the consequences of our actions right now, whether it be that you're promoting this or you're asleep.
Yes. And, it is possible. Look what happened in Virginia.
Right.
It's a parents' issue that changed the governorship.
Wow.
Right.
And if you follow Loudoun County, Virginia, my word, those parents have been fighting that school board forever. That's the district where a girl was raped in a high school bathroom by a boy who identified as a girl. So he was allowed to go into the girls' restroom. He raped a girl. And then the district tried to cover it up, and they sent him to another school where he did the same thing to another girl. And they still tried to cover it up. They even arrested the father of the first girl who was raped. And it all came out, and it was instrumental in getting the governor changed in that state to one that's
motivating parents, to your
Yeah,
third point here.
it
It motivated
them.
it galvanized. This is an issue that easily all the parents could get on board on the same side, and that state was flipped by the there was the Democratic candidate misspoke about what he thought parents' rights in education were, and he misstepped greatly, and he was wrong, and he was proven wrong, and Youngkin surged ahead at the last minute to take over. That's such a great example, Jennifer, because I think it should give hope to Washingtonians. We feel like we're in a blue state where you don't have an opportunity to change this, but just look what happened.
Yes. And, here in the state of Washington, the lockdown really opened parents' eyes to what was going on in the schools. Overnight, their children were put on remote learning, and for the first time, parents across the state were actually in their kids' classrooms and seeing what's going on, seeing what's being taught to their kids. And parents, I think more than I have seen ever, are getting motivated in this state. And so exposing what is going on in the schools is what gets people's attention. Giving them steps that they can take that are actually doable. You can go to a school board meeting, you get to know your school board members. You can testify at a school board meeting. You can go and look at the curriculum. By law, anybody can go to their district office and say, I would like to see the sex ed curriculum, please. And if, for those out there who have a district that is looking to adopt a curriculum, by law, it's for a curriculum that has been adopted. By law, the district must put that curriculum online for the sex ed curriculum. So when that unit is coming up, their kids are going to be taking sex ed. They always have a informational night for parents to look at the curriculum. Well, now, according to the new law, that curriculum must be online.
That is a key thing, because school districts are not complying with that.
Exactly.
And they will
they're not.
intentionally obfuscate and make it very challenging to do any aspect of curriculum review. Just recently here in the Ferndale School District, with a very little bit of notification, they put a review curriculum on 1 hour, one whole hour, for parents to come, only review in-person copies, nothing else, and very little promotion. And surprise, surprise, not very many people even knew about it or were able to take off the time to go and do it. They intentionally make it hard for all curriculum review, especially CSE review. Parents, if you're going to have to get very intentional and thoughtful and more aggressive with your outreach to your districts, telling them, I need to see this, scheduling time to go in during their hours, 8 to 4. They make it inconvenient even when you could go into the office. And if they're not doing what you just said there about posting certain things that are required by law, curriculum online, then you need to hold them up to account on that as well.
Yeah, and so I think we've got some clear, check boxes to check for parents here. We've got, you can look at the legislation. We've got some concerned parent groups here in Whatcom County. Mm-hmm. And right now we just talked about something that they can clearly go into the school board and start talking about. I think the school boards are starting to just not listen to, topic of mask and vaccine and things of that nature. So let's bring them more of what they're doing. And one thing I do want to say is that we have to remember that the schools as a whole kind of taking this shift in this crummy direction. It's not all the teachers. It's not all the administrators. We do have great people within the districts. Put yourself in their shoes too, because they care. Some of them really care about your children. They have for years. So, I would like to encourage those people. I know you have unions, but it's time to speak up because you do care for those children. So I would challenge you to be that voice. I mean, we talk about advocating for kids. Are you truly advocating for them and what's best for them right now? So join the parents. And you know what? To our elected officials, you should do the same. I mean, you want to get me fired up. I will get fired up all day about this. They are supposed to listen to us. They need to be at the school board meetings listening. They need to come to meetings when we want to talk to them, not just on Zoom. I'm sick of looking at people's faces on Zoom because it's convenient or whatever. I mean,
and come Friday, it doesn't have to be on Zoom. The masks are going
imagine
away.
that the day after session.
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
Coincidental. So anyway, would you like to outline for us one more time just kind of those steps that parents can take? We've got the website, your guys' website. Remind me what that was.
parentsrightsined.org.
Okay.
And, we have tried to make it easier for people. We have a lot of information on our website. We have a page that is just dedicated to Washington State. I have examples of curriculum on there, opt-out forms. We have a podcast that is done by our executive director, Suzanne she's going to kill me. Suzanne Gallagher. She produces a podcast. So if you're not one that wants to sit down and read about these issues, listen to her podcast. And you can, doing this work, it costs a little bit, and we're a grassroots organization. If you like what we do, leave a donation. You can also click on the Join Us page, fill that out, and join us. You will get our national newsletter. I do a newsletter every month. You'll get my newsletter if you're in the state of Washington. And we don't sell the information, we don't share it, and we don't bombard you with email every day.
Will that keep people, parents, and folks, up to date on current legislation or things that they can be active in? Will that be that activating button for them? Will that
joining
newsletter?
the mailing list?
Yeah, joining you guys. Will that kind of keep them in the loop of things that they need to activate on?
It will on some things. We talk a lot about issues on that. In my monthly newsletter, I try to bring up an issue that is new or something that parents need to be aware of. I think in my last newsletter, I talked about school-based governance, which is a type of governance system that some of our school boards operate by. But you can also join our Facebook, Washington Parents' Rights in Education on Facebook.
Okay.
We are constantly, every single day, posting information that is timely to Washington State about legislation, about what the Department of Health is doing. I think it's today that the Department of Health is voting on should we add the COVID vaccine to the schedule of vaccinations for kids.
Again.
Right.
Yeah.
Again. They've already, they're doing it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have things like that. I talk about policies. Hey, I just discovered that this policy that a lot of school districts have give districts permission, or they have taken upon themselves to lie to parents about their child's gender status if their child does not want their parents knowing that they're transitioning. And a lot of school districts have this policy that they'll lie to parents. And I have talked to teachers who have run up against this, have been told by their administration, do not tell that child's parents that they are going by a different gender and a different name. I talk about those sort of things.
I can attest to the fact, Jennifer. I have been impressed with the prolific amount of information you've posted to the Washington Parents in Education Facebook page. It's been instructional for me. It's been informative for me. I highly recommend that everybody goes and follow it. Let me put in a bigger pitch for you. You are a volunteer.
Yes,
You
I
do
am.
this because you care. And if you need to find causes out there, you need to find groups and nonprofits and associations like Washington Parents in Education. You need to find these groups to support, and you need to support them. If these topics matter to you, you need to go and support organizations that are putting in the hard work. Jennifer's putting in the hard work to educate all of us. I have gained a tremendous amount of insights following the site, following your Facebook. It's what got me introduced to you in the first place. And I've just really appreciated your heart and passion for going out there and advocating for parents and kids.
Yeah, I'm just a mom. So
Aren't
the
we
message,
all just moms and dads,
Yeah.
right?
The message there is anybody can do what I'm doing, and I don't have any secret passwords to anything. I just look.
And you're not alone. So that's the message here.
Yes.
We can do this,
Yeah.
and we're not alone. So following parents' rights in education, follow the backpack is a good topic to be up on. And the Washington Policy Center also has great resources along with you guys. So I think, and parents really, again, go to your school boards and start demanding to see that curriculum and get on the committees, right?
Get on the committees, yes. You go and you see the curriculum through your district website. But what I would suggest to people is when you go to your school board, don't go in there guns a-blazing.
Right.
Because really, you want to form a relationship with these board members, even if you don't agree with them. Because the adage is really true. You attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. And, meet with school board members outside of the board meeting. Mm-hmm. There's at least 3 board members that are part of my district that I have emailed them and said, hey, you want to go out for coffee? I want to talk about this issue. And they've gone out with me, and they know me now, and they know that I will be polite and fair, and they can have a conversation with me, and I'm not bringing the slings and arrows to throw at them. So you really do want to develop that relationship with the board members.
Right. And so what can parents do if they start to see stuff like this in their children? I mean, my child won't bring it home because they're homeschooled. But if my child had brought this home, I would probably go guns a-blazing. I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
So we shouldn't. What should we do?
I would challenge the board on the reasoning for it being in the library, but I would also inform other parents about it, because the more people going into that board meeting and going, I read this and this is so not appropriate for our kids, we would like it taken out, the more success you are going to have. But also get to know the policies and the rubric that dictates what books they put into the library, because there is a guidance that they go by for picking books for that library.
There's one more step
Right.
that you just said that I think is important. Every single school district has some form of a parent coalition that sprung up in the last year and a half. These are very important to go and find. If you're not already plugged in with the other parents who are getting active, who are educating, who are activating, who are motivating others, go and seek these groups out there. Usually private groups on Facebook for obvious reasons, but you will find kindred spirits. You will find parents looking to educate themselves. You'll find a diversity of opinion inside these groups, but these are other parents that are very interested, maybe even for the first time, in taking active, engaged position in their kids' education, and this is who I would get plugged into locally.
And if you join Parents' Rights in Education, I can help you plug
Perfect.
into a group, either one that we have started in a district, or we work with a lot of different grassroots organizations, and so I can get you plugged into one of those groups.
That's great, because some of parents are starting to get burned out because parents just some people don't show up. And so really we need to keep showing up. We need to keep up the voice. Otherwise, the minority pushing this. I recently judged a speech and debate speech round, and it was about libraries and librarians in our communities. And so I would challenge people, if they're worried about some stuff like this, committees, talk to librarians, not just in your schools, but your public libraries. Mm-hmm. I don't know when the last time people went into the public libraries, but you might be shocked to see the stuff that's now in the public libraries as well.
And remember, with public libraries, they're funded by levies.
Right.
And so
Your property tax dollars
right
at work.
again. Yeah.
yes, so if you're not liking what you're seeing in the library, remember that next time that they come to the voters for funding. No, I'm not voting for funding for you.
Right. Because it's just coming at it from every angle. So thank you so much for coming on here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you
I'm very
making the trip.
encouraged hearing that there's a fighter like you out there educating people. I mean, you don't know how much it means to know that you're not alone, as you said earlier. And everybody hearing this should know you're not alone out there.
Well, we are a team. No one person can do it by themselves. So that's why, everybody needs to be involved.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.